Michael Tubbs.
Has joined the conference.
Good morning, Member Tubbs.
Good morning.
All right, you're ready.
Good morning, and welcome to the June 18th Victim Compensation Board meeting. Michelle, would you please call the roll?
Tubbs,
Present.
Member Shavaro,
Here.
Chairperson Richard.
Present. At this time, would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. So let's start with item number 1 on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of May 21st board meeting here at VCB?
Approval.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the May 21st board meeting minutes. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion passes. Next item on the agenda is public comment on items not on the agenda. This is an opportunity for the public to make comments on items that are not on the agenda. If you'd like to make a comment, I invite you to unmute your phone and please state your name for the record. As a reminder, the board may not discuss or take action on items not on the agenda, but may decide to place the subject on a subsequent agenda. Do we have anyone on the line this morning? Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chair and members of the California Victim Compensation Board. My name is Ed Little with Californians for Safety and Justice. We have a growing statewide network of over 12,000 crime survivors and organized constituency among 8 million Californians living with prior convictions and their families. We want to thank you for your dedication to supporting crime survivors in California. We are asking the board and the legislature to support legislative and regulatory changes to ensure that victims of police violence can access compensation. We are honored to stand with San Francisco District Attorney and his office announced a new local policy to provide compensation and other key supports to victims and witnesses of police violence. We encourage the state to follow San Francisco's lead. We have long advocated for new safety approaches that remove barriers to support caused by contact with the legal system, and that improve access to resources for survivors who have experienced violence at the hands of police. In 2019, we sponsored AB 1449 Garcia, which would have allowed victims to provide documentation in lieu of a police report, including medical or mental health records, to verify with Cal VCB that the crime occurred. AB 1449 also proposed limiting denials based on a victim's implied involvement, and we have sponsored AB 2649 Weber, which sought to remove consideration of a deceased victim's actions when considering compensation for funeral and burial expenses. It is imperative that the legal system provide accountability for and prioritize the needs of all victims of violence by ensuring immediate access to care and support for survivors who need to address their trauma, regardless of who exacted that harm. For victims of police violence who suffer particularly acute trauma, the need is especially great and the urgency is especially crucial. We are grateful for Cal VCB's longstanding commitment to supporting survivors to access the resources that they need to heal, and are anxious to support the board's efforts to remove barriers to access for victims and witnesses to police violence. We have submitted a letter detailing the changes that we are urging, and we look forward to further discussion on this extremely important issue. California law allows documentation other than a police report to verify that a crime occurred for survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence, and human trafficking to access compensation. But other victims are not afforded this same flexibility. For survivors of police violence and family members of those killed by police, this is especially perverse. In these cases, a police report fully documenting the victimization is often elusive, except in rare cases where an officer is prosecuted. Victims and witnesses may also hesitate to speak with officers, resulting in exclusion from compensation or non-cooperation. Additionally, victims of police violence can face denial of compensation claim based on a victim's perceived involvement in the events leading to the crime. Cal VCB regulation encourages giving significant weight to the evidence from and conclusions of a law enforcement agency in making these determinations. In cases of state violence, the very people responsible for the injury or death may be tasked with assigning blame, which can deny the victim or their loved ones access to needed resources. Together, reporting and cooperative requirements and statutory exclusions based on perceptions of the victim's responsibility effectively denies victims of state violence access to compensation. These laws also disproportionately result in denials for otherwise marginalized victims. Recent analysis of denial data in other states, for example, have found that subjective contributory misconduct exclusions and compensation laws are disproportionately used to deny compensation for Black families and Black victims. These policies entrench racialized bias, casting survivors as deserving or undeserving and denying survivors what they need to heal. To expand access to compensation for all victims, and especially victims and witnesses to police violence, we urge Cal VCB and the legislature to, at minimum, immediately take the following steps. Legislator, please allow all victims to use forms of documentation other than a police report to verify that a crime occurred, extending the flexibility already available to survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. Bar denial based solely on the contents of or absence of a police report, or based on whether someone was arrested and charged in the case. Remove or greatly narrow exclusionary criteria based on a victim's alleged involvement, and bar such exclusion in cases involving police use of force and in cases where the victim was killed. Ensure that definitions of crime and victim for the purposes of compensation presumptively include victims of excessive police use of force, regardless of whether an officer is arrested or charged, and relying on evidence other than contents of a police report alone. With regard to administrative and regulatory changes, we request that you amend regulations to promote examination of evidence beyond a police report alone before denying an applicant, especially in cases of police brutality and police killing. To remove clauses that give significant weight to law enforcement opinion. Develop regulations and or procedures to review evidence other than police conclusions or regarding decisions alone when reviewing an application in a case of police-involved violence. Process applications based on incidents of police violence and police killings in Sacramento, rather than in satellite offices to avoid local conflicts of interest. In addition to the immediate recommendations above, to ensure greater access to compensation for survivors of police violence, we have developed and are eager to share our comprehensive series of policy recommendations for the Cal BCB and the legislature to remove additional barriers for victims of crime and to further improve survivor experiences with the compensation program. It is imperative that the legal system provide accountability for and prioritize the needs of all victims of violence by ensuring immediate access to the care and support survivors need to address their trauma, regardless of who exacted the harm. For victims of police violence who suffer particularly acute trauma, the need is especially great and the urgency is especially critical. We are grateful for Cal BCB's long-standing commitment to supporting survivors to access the resources they need to heal and are anxious to support the board's efforts to remove barriers to access for victims and witnesses of police violence. Thank you so much for your time in hearing us out this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Little, for your comments, and thank you for your letter. Are there any other public comments? At this time, we'll move to item number 3 on the agenda. This will be the Executive Officer's Statement, which will be presented by Executive Officer Linda Gledhill. Linda, would you please give your report?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and board members. First, I want to take a minute to acknowledge what we heard in public comments. As we all know, the tragic and senseless death of George Floyd is unacceptable and serves to remind us that we have so much to do in this country in eliminating systematic racism. And it highlights the issue of police violence and the impact on so many communities and families. And as an executive officer, I have 2 responsibilities: to our employees and to the people that we serve. As an employer, I want to make it clear that as a department, we do not stand for discrimination in any form. I've had an open door policy from my first day at the organization, and I'm firmly committed to the fair and equitable treatment of all our employees. I'm equally committed to make sure we are serving victims of crime in our state to the best of our ability. I understand the concerns expressed today about potential limits in the way we currently handle some of these cases, and as we move forward, staff will be discussing and examining ways to help more victims to access our services. I also wanted to update the board on a few other items today. As I have mentioned previously, this week, Pacific Gas and Electric pled guilty on 84 counts of involuntary manslaughter. Because of the guilty plea, those who were victims of the fire are eligible for our services. However, as you know, Cal VCB is the payer of last resort, and most of the victims are part of the PG&E bankruptcy settlement. Accordingly, while Cal VCB will accept applications from campfire victims, if they are part of the bankruptcy settle, we'll be waiting until those funds are dispersed to repay any unpaid expenses. To update you on our staff, our majority of our staff continues to work primarily remotely, although we do have staff in the office to assist the public Monday through Friday from 8 to 5 p.m. Our forward-facing employees, specific to those working in customer service and application processing, continue to adapt and improve while serving the needs of victims, advocates, and providers. We have seen a year-to-year drop in our customer call center. Whether or not that is due to the pandemic, we're still assessing. The numbers continue to go up and down. We know that when people were in a shelter-in-place environment, there was a potential for them to have difficulty to reach out. So we're going to continue to try to promote our services with the hopes that those who may have been a victim of a crime but unable to reach out will do so now. And for the second month in a row, nearly half of our applications came from our online portal, showing that we are, again, that is one way that folks, people who perhaps need our services but are unable to go to potentially a place where they could find help or a victim witness advocate are able to access us that way. So we continue to make sure that we make that as available as possible and promote our services. Finally, I'm very pleased to introduce our new chief counsel to the board. I know you all can't see her in person, but Kim Gauthier is here. She comes to Cal VCB from the Secretary of State's office, where she served as a special counsel. She also served as the Deputy Secretary of State for Operations and the Assistant Chief Counsel at the Secretary of State's office. And she has also served as the Chief Counsel for the First Five Commission. Kim started on Monday and has already been dropped into a hotbed of activity. So I appreciate, and I know she looks forward to working with the board. I also want to publicly thank Jenny Wan, who has been serving as our acting chief counsel and serving the board admirably since I started in January. So we definitely appreciate her services. As you know, the calendar was set for this year. The board does not meet in July. So before our August board meeting, my hope is to re-examine how we can best hold these meetings, whether or not they are telephonically, online, or in person, depending on our circumstances. So I look forward to working with all of the board on that between now and August. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments from Ms. Gledhill?
Yes, Mayor Tubbs here. First of all, congratulations on the appointment, and thank you for your statement and your support. I know you mentioned sort of the letters. I know we had email correspondence, so I'm just wondering from the board level, what support, directive, what do you need to bring us back something that incorporates changes that will allow victims of police violence to access some of the VCB programming and funds?
Thank you, Mr. Tubbs. What we are going to do is take a look at the documents that we received and examine whether or not we need potentially what the best path is to move forward, whether that's legislation, regulation, a board action. If it doesn't require board action, that's something we could place on the August agenda. We need a little bit more time to examine all of the material and come to the best solution.
So there'll be some sort of report or update at the August meeting?
Yes, we will definitely will. If nothing else, I will provide an update at the August meeting.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, with that, we will move to the contract update. That will also be presented by Ms. Gledhill.
Thank you. I am going to remove the second item on your contract update, the 10-Up Inc. contract, from the agenda. Therefore, the only items are informational. So informational, the first one is a 45-minute e-learning course that will promote our CalVCB online advocate portal. We will be launching in a few months a place for advocates to go online and submit applications and track applications that they have submitted for victims. This is part of the Cal OES grant that we received to promote victims' compensation services. And then there are amendments to the District Attorney, Santa Barbara and San Francisco District Attorney Office contracts. This allows both of those offices to process more applications on behalf of Victims' Compensation Board.
Are there any additional questions? Hearing none, let's move to item 5 of the agenda, which is the legislative update that will be presented by Senior Attorney Jenny Wong.
Morning. Senate Bill 417 passed off the Assembly floor and moved to the Senate floor for concurrence. This bill would appropriate $5,087,040 from the general fund to pay 7 erroneous conviction claims approved by CalVCB for Moonshadow Naomi Taggart, Lionel Omar Rubalcava, Ruben Martinez Jr., Michelle Marie Poulos, Lawrence M. Martin, Ricky Leo Davis, and Samuel Bonner. Senate Bill 74, which is the Budget Act of 2020, contains a transfer of $23.5 million from the general fund to the restitution fund. Upon order of the Director of Finance, the amount available for transfer in this item may be increased by an amount sufficient to backfill the restitution fund if a determination is made that revenues are insufficient to support the California Victim Compensation Board. Assembly Bill 2028 passed off the Assembly floor and was referred to the Senate. There was an amendment to the bill which clarified that writings and material provided to members of a state body, such as board members, in connection with a matter subject to discussion or consideration at a board meeting, must be posted on the internet at least 48 hours in advance of a board meeting or on the same day writings or materials are provided to board members, whichever is earlier. And that is all.
Are there any questions for Ms. Wong? Hearing none, we will now move to the Victim Compensation Program portion of our agenda. The next item is the request to disqualify Susan Swim, a provider of mental health services, that will be presented by Deputy Executive Officer of the Victim Compensation Division, Natalie Mack. Good morning, Ms. Mack.
Good morning. Today I'm representing a board item that recommends permanently disqualifying Dr. Susan Swim as an authorized provider of mental health services to eligible claimants for California victim compensation. Dr. Swim has been additional treatment plans for 11 different claimants, all of which contain the same information on symptoms, behaviors, preventions, conscious goals. Calvis filed a complaint for behavioral sciences, and on June 28, 2017, revealed that Dr. Swim was gross negligence or incompetence, failed to keep acceptable records in connection with the victim services provided to claimants. The Board of Behavioral Sciences stayed the revocation of her license and imposed 19 terms and conditions and placed her on a 3-year probation. Dr. Swim has stated on several occasions she no longer plans to serve Calvis claimants and has paid the overpayment owed in full, totaling $6,804. In seeking approval of staff's recommendation to disqualify Dr. Swim and not to further reimburse her for any services she provides to Calvis claimants, this would apply either as a private practice or an employee of an agency providing mental health treatment to Calvis claimants.
Is there anyone on the line who would like to address the board on this item? Is there any discussion? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve staff's recommendation to permanently disqualify Susan Swim as an authorized provider of mental health
A
services?
participant has joined the conference. A participant has left the conference.
Okay, we'll keep going. Authorized provider of mental health services to eligible claimants of the Victim Compensation Program. Do I have a move for approval?
Move approval. I
Any-
move approval.
Any discussion? Hearing none, it's been moved and seconded to approve staff recommendation. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion to approve
Aye.
staff recommendation passes. Thank you, board members. Thank you, Ms. Mack. Appreciate that. Next, we have a proposal to approve amended Trauma Recovery Center Grants Awards. This will be presented by Deputy Executive Officer of Victims Compensation Division, Ms. Mack again.
Today I present staff's proposal to amend previously approved TRC grant award amounts due to a reduction in funding as published in the May revise of the governor's proposed fiscal year 2021 budget. At the March 19th, 2024 meeting, the board approved 7 TRC grant awards totaling $13,567,344 based on the projected appropriation of $12,178,000 from the Safe Neighbors and Schools Fund and $2 million from the Restitution Fund as published in the governor's budget in January 2020. The May revise reduced the appropriation to $10,251,000
A participant has joined the conference.
in total funds available to the TRC grant award to $11,738,450. The revised award amounts reflect equitable increases based on previous grant awards and requested amounts. Staff recommends that the board adopt the amended awards to the following 4 TRCs. Downtown Learning Center, $1,056,671.22. Christian Counseling Services, $863,409.33. Miracles Counseling Center, $1,042,496.64. And South Alameda County in the $1,380,556.81.
Thank you, Ms. Mack. Is there anyone who would like to address the board on this item on the phone? Hearing
And
none.
Madam Chair, this is Mayor Tubbs here. I don't know, maybe if it's my connection, but I'm having a lot of trouble hearing the presentation.
Okay, is your mic on? Member Tubbs, can you hear her better now?
I hear you very clearly. I hear her very faintly.
Okay, we're going to switch mics. Thank you for that. Can you
Thank you.
sit there?
Clear out of this one?
A little closer to it.
Is it any clearer out of this one?
Yeah, whoever's talking now, I hear you very clearly.
Okay. How
Mem-
much?
Member Tubbs, would you like her to repeat the staff recommendation or summary?
No, I read the agenda item, but just moving forward, I just want to make sure I'm hearing everything.
Okay, perfect, thank you. If there's no one on the phone, is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve staff recommendation to adopt the amended contract awards to the following 4 trauma recovery centers? Downtown Women's Center for $1,056,679.22. Christian Counseling Services for $863,409.33. Miracles Counseling Center, $1,042,496,664. Apologize for that. South Alameda County for $1,380,556.81. Do I have a motion on this item?
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion? It's been moved and seconded to approve the staff's recommendation to adopt the amended contract awards to the 4 trauma recovery centers. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Mack. We appreciate you. At this time, the board will now convene into closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 1126, Subdivision C3, to discuss numbers 1 through 50 of the Victim Compensation Program. We will hang up from this
Madam
call.
Chair? Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I just received some communication that some folks who had sent letters in regarding the police violence reform that our ED will be researching. A couple of DA's offices just logged in, and I was just hoping before we adjourn for closed session, the ED could just briefly recant her answer about sort of the work that will be done between now and August around coming up with some proposals for the board to consider, just so they can hear. I think they had trouble logging on a little bit earlier.
Oh, absolutely, Mayor Tubbs. Thank you for that. So this is regarding public comment on a non-agendized item. Do we have someone on the line? The board received several letters at this time. We would like you to unmute and please state your name for the record. Do we have anyone? I think we have someone on the line, or they're trying to. Okay, your line is open. Mayor Tubbs, why don't we go ahead and convene closed session, and then we can open this back up before we close the board meeting today? Would that work for those callers?
Or I think it's just a 1 minute just recap from the executive director just around sort of her plans around kind of the answer to the question I posed earlier. I think that will work as well before we adjourn, if possible.
Okay, perfect. Would you like to do that at this time, Ms. Gledhill? Recap your comments?
Of course, yes. Happy to do so. Appreciate the public comment and the letters that we received. The board is absolutely committed to examining this issue and discussing what ways we can address it, whether it's via legislation, regulations, or internal board policy, and we will bring the matter back at the August board meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? We will now convene to close session. Thank you.
Michael Tubbs.
has left the conference.
Rick Shavaro.
Has left the conference. A participant has left the conference. A participant has joined the conference. A participant has joined the conference.
Rick is on.
And Michael's on.
Okay. The board is reconvening now into open session pursuant to Government Code Section 11126, Subdivision C3, as it pertains to Victim Compensation Program cases. Do I have a motion for numbers 1 through 50 of the Victim Compensation Program?
So moved.
Oh, second.
Any discussion? It's been moved and seconded that staff recommendations for numbers 1 through 50 of the Victims' Compensation Program be adopted. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion to adopt staff recommendation passes. Is there any other business that needs to come before the board before we adjourn?
Nope.
Seeing none, the meeting is adjourned. The next meeting is scheduled to occur on August 20th. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you.
A participant has left the conference.
Mary Thompson.
Has left the conference. A participant has left the conference.